Good afternoon, everybody. How are we all doing today? Cool. Feeling a little tired today for whatever reason.
Snow.
Nah, snow. I mean, to call that snow, you almost need an amplifier, a visual amplifier to call that snow. That was a slight frozen mist that invoked the normal wimpy 2-hour delay by our institution. But it probably got you some extra sleep this morning.
Yeah, man, I was studying.
Well, I was here at my normal time, so.
How'd you brave the ice out there?
Ice. Jeez. I have more total ice in my refrigerator than was on the totality of Newburgh. So, yeah. Yes.
Can I ask 2 questions that are related to the course?
Since you raised your hand, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I was studying and I had 2 questions that came up. So I was wondering that one of the papers that we read was talking about how altricial young is like the derivative or the derived character, and then precocial. So the other one is
Okay. Yes.
like one with feathers is like the primitive one. What would be the selective pressure that would drive you to have no feathers when you're born?
First off, I want what you need to understand about altricial versus precocial is it's not an either or. Okay, it's another one of those, how I'm on this soapbox about how humans like to categorize things. This is a gradient of developmental strategies. It's not, there are extreme altricial birds, like the passerines, and extreme precocial birds like, ducks and, whatever. But there's a whole slew of things. And if we get to that content, which we may very well in here since there's so few of you, and we are going to regain some lectures because of fewer days of oral reports. We may actually get to that this year. You'll see that there are many gradients of that in between. So that doesn't answer your original question. I've not given that a lot of thought, actually. But when you think about the differences between precocial and altricial, the race to development emphasizes and prioritizes different things. So when you are a precocial bird, what you want is growth. You just want growth as quickly as you can get it, because as soon as you basically get out of the egg, you're up and running around. Whereas in altricial birds, the emphasis is on organ development. All right. So for example, one of the reasons why some would argue that passerines, have a higher level of intelligence, perhaps song ability, things like that, is that the offspring are afforded additional time to develop their brain before they actually fledge, and the body growth that gets them to the point of fledging takes a lot longer time, so they can invest energy in other things. So that would be my thought. So which one did they say was a primitive trait?
The primitive trait was the precocial.
Yeah, that would be my guess too, because the advantage of getting up and moving is that you're not tied to one place, because a high point of mortality for a lot of birds is nest predation. And with precocial, you're moving around all the time. So, you're not you're not tied to a nest. So.
Then my second question,
Mhm.
which is not really related, it's really the birds, but I was looking at the ball skiing paper with the PIV system,
Mhm.
and I still don't really understand like what exactly they're doing with PIV. Like I know when you showed the pictures, it showed like the airfoils, but I still don't really understand like how they're getting.
All right, so here is, I wonder if I've got any videos of us doing this. Well, anyway, so when we do PIV, it starts off with, you've got this machine that you put olive oil in, you stick a hose into the chamber where the bird is, and you blow all this olive oil smoke into the chamber. And the smoke, it's literally atomized olive oil. You have micron size olive oil particles, okay? And then when you're ready to start a run, the bird goes and does its thing. And when the bird gets into position, Brett will say, hit it. And then he fires the lasers. And so what the lasers do, lasers pass a plane of light over whatever surface that you want to do PIV on. And that laser lights up every individual olive oil particle.
In the chamber or just where the laser
Just where the laser is. Okay. And then it's not just one pulse of laser, though. In his old system, it was 2 successive pulses of laser. So what happens is you have I'm gonna amplify the size of an olive oil particle right here. So you have an olive oil particle right here that gets illuminated by a laser pulse. All right. Then in a short period of time, that olive oil particle is going to move some distance. And so it's going to be up here. Then you get a second laser pulse that will illuminate it again here. And so then you have an imaging system that will image the change in position of the olive oil from here to here. All right. And what is driving the change in position of these olive oil particles is the air currents. Okay, so this is moving from here to here because I have air that is also moving in that direction. And so what we use the olive oil particles for, that we illuminate, and the camera's looking at zillions of these olive oil particles, is we're using those to visualize the air currents that are moving around the bird. So when the bird's flying, you've got that circular motion around the wings. We can visualize that because the olive oil particles are moving with the air. Okay. And so, when we were, I'll get you a second, Emily. When we were looking at the hummingbird images last time, and we saw those big blue or orange spots, that is the size of the air currents that were being shed, the tip vortices that were being shed, and the size of those vortices corresponds to the amount of lift that's being produced. And it's software that colors those things. If you actually look at the raw images that are produced by the PIV system, they're black and white. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Emily.
So in this drawing, the 2 arrows that indicate like the laser, is the plane of light like it's the same plane? So the whiteboard is like the plane.
Yeah, I mean the laser is in the same plane both times, and I just drew it that way to illustrate that you're getting a second illumination of it. But the movement, the amount that the olive oil particles change position is actually really small, and so the same plane of laser light can illuminate it both times.
Even if it's like kind of different, like instead of, so it doesn't just track movement across the one plane, it can also kind of track it like how it is.
So you mean towards or away from the laser? It probably wouldn't see that. It would only be tracking movement that is I don't know, I want to say perpendicular to the plane, but a lot of them aren't exactly perpendicular to the plane, but they, it's got to be moving. If the plane's this way, it's got to be kind of moving this way, maybe even this way or that way.
Like if there's a plane and it's just like moving like this,
You probably wouldn't see it. Yeah, because stick your arm out, the other arm. Okay, here's a wing. You got a wing right here. Though we're shooting the laser, across this right here. All right. And it's illuminating the movement of particles, but the camera is probably looking this way. Actually, I lied to you because the camera is actually looking at it from the side. Yeah, and so actually the particles actually they are moving with the plane, and it's got to be perpendicular to the lens of the camera for the camera to see it. So I lied to you. Yeah. So does that make sense? Yeah.
thank you.
And now he has been trying to get one of these for years, but he has this fancy new one that he's got that is a high resolution. And so his old system just took two laser pulses is all it got. And so it doesn't have as high resolution because they're not necessarily that close together. But now he's got a laser that fires several in succession. So you can actually track in a more granular fashion the movement of the olive oil particles. The downside of his new system is it is not portable at all. I mean, his old system, you could pack it up and take it wherever you want to go. We took it to Arizona with us one summer, but this new one, the laser's on this long arm, and it's very sensitive to being jostled too much because the lasers can kind of get out of alignment on it. So that one kind of I think is bound to stay in the lab, but you get much better resolution PIV with it. Did I answer all your questions? Anybody else have questions before we finish off flight? And we will finish off flight. You cannot leave until we finish off flight today. No? All right. Let's do it. And then Thursday, you can have your little exercise. Okay, let's share a screen. Yes, celebration of knowledge. Exactly. Let's see here.
How many slides do we have left?
Huh?
How many slides do we have left?
Oh, 4 or 5.
Oh, very chill.
Yeah. Should we look at my latest grandchild picture today? Actually, I want to get out of this. I want to.
Which grandchild?
This would be Milo. All right, let's stop the share for a minute. Let's pull up, see if I can do this. There we go. Can you see that? All right. Let's go to yeah, it's probably this one. This is him today. That's him today. Yeah, that isn't it. Yeah. Yeah. And he's got his little pacifier in there, but I don't think he used his pacifier one time while I was there. Neither of these boys were much in the pacifier, so it's odd that he actually has it in his mouth. Oh, what else? Let's see, what else do we got here? We got a little movie. He likes to chew on his fingers.
They're tasty.
Yeah.
Did Cody learn how to ride a bike?
Oh, yeah. Cody is on this, what's called a strider. And I think it's a great way to learn how to ride a bike. Let's see what's going on here.
How old is Cody now?
How,
Two, right?
he's 2 and 4 months. Uh, oh, my joy, my joy. Oh, well, okay, one more. Yeah, I have totally wasted 17 minutes of class, huh? That's right.
You're answering 14 questions.
I know. Oh, well, maybe one more. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a little Asian music there. Okay. All right, now it's time. All right, we now got to go do flight.
We get through all 4 slides today. We only have 1 hour left. Less. Little less than an hour. Yeah. I don't think we can do it, guys. Better get moving on those.
All righty. Last time we left off, we had just talked about high-speed wings, okay? Now we're going to move on to slotted high-lift wings, okay? We are going to talk about birds of prey. I know you've been waiting for this, dying for this, okay? So when we look at the wings of birds of prey, they are designed for a very specific type of flight, particularly the wings of birds of prey that are open, open field, open area flyers, like the bald eagle here. These type of wings are characterized by having some pretty intense slotting at the ends. We've already talked a little bit about the value of having those slots. The aspect ratio of these wings is sort of intermediate between high speed and elliptical, so it's kind of a mid-range aspect ratio. And as I mentioned, I think I mentioned this last time, this wing style is actually designed to catch air if it's kind of moving upwards. And we'll talk in a moment, we'll talk about specific types of soaring that these wings are really, really good at. Okay. And so these wings actually can act somewhat like a kite. And this allows them to take advantage of rising air masses. And we call this static soaring. There are a couple of types of this that we'll illustrate in another slide. These wings will have reduced wing loading, not the lowest wing loading. Elliptical wings have the lowest wing loading, but they have reduced wing loading. And I think we mentioned this last time as well, that this is useful for a bird that's going to carry a large prey item. So if they're going to go down and grab that bunny and, and have it for lunch, and it's going to carry it someplace so it can go find someplace to do its fine dining, then this helps it to be able to fly as efficiently as possible, because the weight of that prey also will contribute to wing loading. Okay, so so this wing design is really helpful for that. This wing design actually can allow for slow flight speeds. And we talked last time a little bit about how slotting helps to reduce drag, so that it gives you that lift to drag ratio that's more favorable to producing lift even at slower flight speeds, because it's going to reduce the size of those tip vortices, because the slot of each individual feather will probably produce its own little tip vortice, and then they'll be smaller and not interfere with airflow over as large a portion of the wing. Okay. All right, so another thing that we did talk about, so you guys asked me questions, so I actually give you previews of a lot of this information. I throw this up here because this is the abstract from a paper that was given by Brett Van Clausen, who was formerly Brett's PhD student. This is Brett way back in like 2011, when he didn't have gray hair. He's got a lot more gray hair now. And this is a former research student of mine, Kyle Mackey. And we were down there working, and so I just threw the picture of her on there. But this talk here was part of Brett's PhD work, where he was working out the aerodynamics associated with those wing tips that kind of point up in the air. And we talked about how if you go and look at like Alaska Airlines jets, they all have them where the tips point up. And this is to help move those shed vortices by the tips, those tip vortices, in a different direction, so they have less of an influence over the airflow of the wing. And they were able to show, and they have this interesting little device right here. This here is a motor that will take this wing and it will spin it in a circle. And so by spinning it in a circle, you can promote airflow over the wing, and then they can do PIV just just on that wing that's on the motor. And they can look at how different wing formations will influence the airflow around the wing, how much turbulence there is, that's all that sort of thing. And so it's pretty cool. If you were to go to Brett's lab, you'd see he has a whole box full of all of these wings that were mounted so that they can be used on that device right there. So it's kind of cool. All right. So static soaring, there's two main types of static soaring. One that maybe you're familiar with both of them, I don't know. But the first is what we call thermal soaring. And what happens with thermal soaring is that you get rising hot air off of, that comes up from the ground. So like if the sun is kind of beating on the ground gets hot, this makes the air hot and hot air rises. And so birds of prey will often make use of these rising bits of hot air, and we call these thermals. And so what will happen is a bird will catch this, and they will soar in spirals around the rising air mass. You'll see them not flapping much at all, and they will just go up with the warm air. And then when they get to a certain altitude, probably when the air cools off enough to where it's not really rising anymore, they will leave that thermal and they will just soar down and then catch another one and then ride it back up as well. And that's what we call thermal soaring. And they will hunt using this. They will just travel. If they're not in a hurry, they will just kind of move from one thermal to the next, and it'll save them a ton in terms of flight costs, and get from point A to point B. And their wings are really good for that because, again, they're designed to kind of function like a kite, so they can catch that air really, really well. Now, there's another type of static soaring that's called slope soaring. And, a popular thing to do is for people who like to go watch birds is to go to areas that are along rivers that are deep in canyons, because birds of prey will often follow these canyons, and it's because they can use this slope soaring in those canyons. What happens is you get some stiff winds, and the wind will encounter the canyon walls and then be redirected upwards. Okay. And so if the winds are sufficiently strong, and often the wind coming down these canyons they can actually just sit up there and soar above that upward directed wind. The wind doesn't even have to be high. And what's really interesting is not just birds of prey will take advantage of this. You will sometimes find birds that will have elliptical wings that are not designed for soaring at all. If the winds are substantially strong enough, you'll find some of them up there just kind of, surfing in the wind. All right. So, and as I mentioned, this type of soaring often is connected to major migration routes for birds of prey. And so that's why bird watchers will go along these cliffs to see how many different species of birds of prey that they can find. All right, questions so far? Yes.
How large are the sleeping diet?
For what?
I'm just thinking like, there's a thermal, like a thermal on top like this size.
I would imagine it varies in size, but I would imagine also they're not very small. Because when you see a bird flying on a thermal, they're making a nice loop around it. So, it's not like they have to kind of spin in one place. So I don't know. I doubt there is one diameter for them, but they generally tend to be decent enough in size that allows them to do that. If I were to just guess based on birds I've seen flying in circles, I would guess that these thermals could be, 50, 100 feet in diameter, maybe even more.
So when like the eagle or like the red-tailed hawk is like coasting like around, spiraling up, it's riding the edge of the thermal.
Well, yeah, it probably is riding the edge of the thermal. And it's the thermal itself is not necessarily spinning, but the hawk is going in a circle to stay within the thermal. So I don't know that the thermal may actually be spinning. But the bird of prey is just trying to stay in it. They may very well be on the edge of the thermal. I've never, I don't think I could visualize a thermal. So, anything else?
I actually a question about living and slotted primary feathers. Do birds, other birds, like sparrows with low wing loading also have slotted feathers?
They not to the same extent that a bird of prey does. But if you look at the primary feathers of a passerine when it is flying, under certain circumstances, you can get separation between them. And I would imagine that there is some aerodynamic advantage that can occur from that. I'm speculating, but I would suspect that that's the case. I don't know that anybody's actually studied that. So, anything else? All right, let's watch a little movie here. Watch a soaring eagle here with music. And you can actually see the feather tips pointing up in the bird there too. So just sitting up there, just kind of trucking around. You see that bird probably came off of the thermal right there. You can see it's getting a little ground and has to start flapping a little more. All right, now, our last wing type, high aspect ratio wings. So now we're going to get in and talk about the longest and narrowest wings. And so now we get to talk about the albatross and similar birds. They have the highest aspect ratio wings. The wings are very long and narrow, just like high-speed wings, only they tend to be more elongated. And these wings are designed to maximize lift production, particularly at higher speeds. So remember last time we talked about how most lift is produced on the leading edge of the wing. So it doesn't have to be very broad. So if you have a lot of leading edge, then you can produce a lot of lift if you are moving at speed forward. Now, the trade-off in this kind of wings is you have no maneuverability and you don't take off very well. It's very hard to take off. There aren't a lot of birds that have this type of wing, and the type of birds that do have this type of wing are going to be birds that spend a lot of time over the ocean. And so they're in the air a lot. And so they don't, it's not like they have barriers that they have to fly around, so they don't need a lot of maneuverability. There tends to be quite a bit of wind out over the ocean. And so this is really useful for a bird that just wants to soar all the time. And like I say, you don't see them sitting on the water much. Mostly when they're on the water, it's because they got to feed. The birds that have this are going to be birds in the order Procellariiformes. So it's going to be things like the albatross, things like shearwaters will have this to some degree. Birds like that just don't spend time over land. Gulls sort of have this, but it's nowhere near to the extent that the albatross does. And this is partially because gulls also spend a fair amount of time on land. So it's less useful for them when they have to navigate in a terrestrial environment as well. So one of the common ways that these birds fly to take advantage of the high lift producing ability of these wings is they use what's called dynamic soaring. And so this diagram down here at the bottom, I think, does the best job of illustrating it. And so dynamic soaring depends on wind speeds being slower near the surface and higher when you get it at some elevation. And so what happens is the bird is coming down, and then it will turn and fly directly into the wind. And then as it elevates, the wind speed gets higher and higher and higher, which means lift production gets higher and higher and higher. And so the bird will go up to some elevation that it wants to get to. Then it will do kind of a 180 and fly with the wind going back down. And then when it gets back down to the surface, it will again turn back into the wind and repeat the process. Does that make sense to everybody? Whenever I see this, I think of a tacking sailboat, and the bird can do this for hours upon hours upon hours. And basically, probably rarely ever flap its wings. Okay. And the only thing that's going to dictate the direction that it flies is going to be which direction the wind is coming from. Yeah.
So when it's going up in elevation, it has to be going opposite direction of the wind, and when it's coming back down towards the water, it has to be going the same direction.
It goes in the same direction, right? So just basically doing this all day. And like I say, they're not spending a lot of energy, because if that wind is coming into them with any speed whatsoever, those wings can produce a lot of lift. Okay. So you remember I've likened, the design of an albatross to how they design, our gliders that people will fly. And if you'll note that gliders, when they are taken into the air, they are pulled by another airplane. Okay. And they're designed to soar. They're not designed to take off. Well, they do land, but But they're not designed to take off, but they have long, narrow wings for the same reason, because this is the most efficient way to produce lift. When you are moving through the air. Questions? Yeah.
So thermals above ground or above like land surfaces, that's not. It's
No, it's rising air.
rising.
Yeah, so what the way thermals are produced is you have solar energy that will strike the ground.
Right.
The ground will absorb that heat. It'll absorb the solar radiation, and so it will heat up. It will get hotter than the air. It will heat the air if it's sitting right above it, and that hot air is going to rise. Because hot air, that's what hot air does, is it rises. And so you'll get this stream of hot air that's going up into the air, and that's what the bird is riding.
Right. And that was actually the question that I had in my mind. I was like, I was wondering if birds riding thermals, they're in utilizing static soaring. Is that like a behavior more commonly seen in like warmer months?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You wouldn't see a bird on a cold. Now, it doesn't mean that thermal soaring can't occur on a cold day, because you saw the eagle, there was snow on the ground. What you really need is solar radiation, because solar radiation can make some things really hot. I mean, think about it. When you go out and stand outside on a cloudy day and you feel cool, and all of a sudden you get a cloud break and the sun comes out, you all of a sudden feel a lot warmer. And that's not because the air temperature has increased. It's because you now are directly being impacted by solar radiation, and you're absorbing that solar radiation.
So it's more like thermal soaring take place like on the days.
Yeah, you wouldn't see it on a cloudy day. Yeah.
Will a bird, especially since these things are kind of used for solar, and I'm assuming like maybe this would help them also kind of look for food to eat. Would you, and I don't know how much, basically, would a bird wait to find food until, or like wait to go hunting if they could, until there are weather conditions that are more favorable to these lower energy types of flying as they forage?
Yeah, what I actually suspect that in really bad weather, all these birds will be sitting on the water. They won't be they won't be up doing this.
Yeah. Okay.
And usually when these guys feed, the food will be in concentration, so they'll sit down and just tank up, and eat their food, and then get up and go travel, and or go follow fishing boats who throw a lot of their leftovers overboard. So
That's what we should do, go on a fishing.
I've done that once with this class. It wasn't pretty.
Okay.
Too many seasick people. I spent a lot of money on a trip where everybody spent more time looking at the water than they did at the birds. So okay, one last thing. Okay, I'm going to show you a video of an albatross just kind of kicking back and soaring. This is not really any examples of what we've looked at so far, but this is an albatross. It's just in a stiff wind, but I think it illustrates just how good their wings are at producing lift. And this is the shy albatross, which really isn't too shy because it's just hanging right out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I honestly don't know how we did that.
It looks so dumb. So are they like hunting, or are they just They don't have anything better.
You know what? I think that they just like being in the air, because that bird is probably not moving forward. It's probably flying in place or not moving very much.
It's difficult to like balance.
Yeah, well, and the bird probably has its legs sticking out because it actually is trying to create a little drag for stability. But yeah, that's impressive how it can just stick its wings out there and just even fly backwards.
It's funny because I feel like the way it stands, like, standing for a subway event, like, for certain stuff.
You'll need to work on your feather growth.
Works good at iPod.
Hey, they look like they're having a good time.
Educational field trip to go hang gliding.
No,
Well, being a human of sound mind, I am one who has a great appreciation for gravity. Well, that's how he gets his camera so close, because he can just sit right next to him. All right, that's enough. All right. So now for a slight transition into physiology. So for the three of you, you're going to rejoice in this chapter because you're going to have heard a lot of this stuff before. Not so much for you.
Wait, is this chapter 6?
This is chapter 6.
Is this gonna be on the exam?
Whitney said no.
No.
You need to consider how good of a source she is for this information.
Pretty good, because I asked you earlier this morning. I can vouch, I was there.
No, this will not be on the exam. I just finished everything that will be on the exams. Yeah. So. And you'll be all ready for the exam on Thursday, right?
Oh, I'm so ready.
Yeah, well, you got a little extra preparation because you didn't have to be prepared last week, as noted by your little prayer dance. So, all right, physiology. We'll start off with body temperature. Birds have really high body temperature relative to mammals. Okay, they can exceed 40 degrees. If we look at this graph right here, we have number of species on this axis, temperature on this axis here. The solid bars right here are mammals. The dotted ones are birds. You can see that there's a fairly clear separation between most birds and mammals, with birds being higher in body temperature. And for those of you who excel at infrared imaging, looking at hummingbirds, you'll note that we've taken surface temperatures of hummingbirds that can be up to 43 degrees. And so these birds can get really, really hot. It's generally believed that the high body temperatures help them to be really active and fast moving, being able to respond to the environment very, very quickly. And one of the reasons for this is that at higher temperature, your biological processes will occur much more quickly. And this is driven by what we call the Q10 effect, and I'll define that for you in the next slide, okay? But this is going to impact things like the rate of nerve transmission. So your nerve signals will travel faster because you're at a higher temperature. All right. This is going to allow you to activate and move things like flight muscles much more quickly than a human would be able to move like your leg muscles. There is a cost at being at such a high temperature, however, and that is one, you spend more energy. When you're warmer, the energy cost is higher. And it also puts your body temperature closer to lethal temperature, which is generally believed to be somewhere around 46 degrees C. Right? But a bird's physiology is absolutely designed to provide itself with the energy that it needs. Heck, we got a hummingbird that sucks on nectar. Okay. And even more importantly, to rid itself of accumulating metabolic waste that are going to be a consequence of the higher metabolic rate. And this red line here is important because this red line indicates the rate at which your body must turn over its proteins at a variety of temperatures. And you can see that it's an exponential increase as temperatures get warmer. And you can see that birds are turning over body proteins much more quickly than mammals are. And what that means is they're also producing a higher amount of nitrogenous waste. In mammals, that would be urea. In birds, that would be uric acid, mostly. I say mostly because no animals produce 100% of one type of nitrogenous waste. Okay. The adaptation of uric acid is important for birds because that is the least toxic of all of the nitrogenous wastes. Urea is actually the second least toxic. You don't want to be an ammonia producer. Ammonia is cheap to make, but you know, it's sort of like going to bed in Mr. Clean. Yeah. Your nose burns just thinking about it, doesn't it? So anyway, there is a cost to functioning at a high temperature. All right, Q10. What do we mean by Q10? Q10 is a variable that defines the rate at which biological processes speed up with an increase in temperature. Specifically, what it refers to is the proportional change in a biological rate with a 10-degree change in ambient temperature or environmental temperature, or in the case of a process inside the body temperature. Most Q10 values for biological processes are between 2 and 3. And so what that means is if you have a Q10 of 2, that means that you increase the temperature by 10 degrees C, you're going to double the rate. And this graph right here, it plots rate of reaction on the y-axis, temperature on the x-axis. So for a Q10 of 1, it's just flat. Q10 of 2, it's that one curve right there. Q10 of 3, it's this curve right here. Does that make sense to everybody? Here's a graph that plots metabolic rate indicated by oxygen consumption on the y-axis here and body weight on the x-axis. And it just stacks the different taxons of animal and their metabolic rates. And what you can see here is passerine birds are the highest, placental mammals are below them, then our ectotherms, lizards, and amphibians are below them, just so you can get a kind of an idea as to the pecking order in terms of metabolic rate. Yes?
Where do other birds live?
Non-passerine birds are going to be in the middle here, probably actually a little closer to mammals than to passerine birds. Passerine birds have the highest metabolic rates. They're considered to be the most modern birds, and these high metabolic rates are supportive of a lot of the higher level functions that the passerines are capable of. Now, being at a higher temperature and having higher metabolic rates means that you need to efficiently extract oxygen from the environment, because they are aerobic, just like mammals and every other vertebrate is. All right. So they have a very efficient respiratory system, and their respiratory system is not designed anything like a mammalian respiratory system. It's totally different. They do not have a diaphragm. Okay. So while all of you sit out there and expand your lungs by contracting your diaphragm, a bird can't do that. They expand their lungs by dropping their sternum. They have no residual airspace, no dead airspace in the respiratory tract of a bird. You'll know what I mean by dead airspace. So, you want to give me a definition of dead airspace?
I just remember learning about this in anatomy and physiology, but like the total lung capacity that for humans, I think like in tidal respiration, it's like the volume of the lungs and like minus. It's like the difference between like a total volume of the lungs and then like the amount of air inspired.
So dead airspace, there is a certain amount of air that you inhale and exhale that never sees the lungs. All right. And so so it has to do with the volume of a portion of your trachea, okay, and tracheals, and that is what we call dead air space. And so, for example, if you hyperventilate and you take really shallow breaths, and the volume of those breaths does not exceed your anatomical dead space, then when you inhale, the air will never go to the lungs. Okay. And so when I teach physiology and I'm teaching the importance of respiratory volume, or the size of your respirations, I use this example where if you've got a minute ventilation, which refers to the amount of air that you move in and out over the course of a minute in your lungs, and you're doing this at like 6 liters. If you have a minute ventilation of like 100, or if your respiratory tidal volume is 150 mils, over a minute you can move 6 liters of air, but none of it ever sees the lungs, because your tidal volume is not big enough to overcome your anatomical dead space in your lungs. Okay. And so you need a bigger tidal volume to get air past that anatomical dead space. That makes sense? This is why when you go snorkeling, it's harder to breathe, because you basically extend your anatomical dead space with the snorkel. And so you're having to pull in more. You actually have to breathe deeper in order to overcome your anatomical dead space when you've got a snorkel in your mouth. Okay.
How is that? Or that's not an important question for this class. Never mind.
Okay. It also increases the resistance to air movement as well, which is why it's harder. But anyway, that's not a problem. That is not a problem with birds, because birds, the airflow through their lungs is unidirectional. Mammals have a bidirectional airflow. We call it tidal respiration. You breathe in, you breathe out, but that's not the way the avian lung works. The avian lung, they flow air through their lungs in one direction, so they don't have to deal with anatomical dead space like mammals do. So the avian respiratory system, they have the nares, which are the holes in the top of their bill. Okay, they have the trachea. The trachea will divide up into the bronchi. And then another difference between birds and mammals is that birds have all of these air sacs, and most birds have 9 of them. There are some variations with this as well. And these air sacs are designed to be storage areas for air as it's moving through the respiratory system. And then you have the lungs. So, yes.
How do they like exhale then if you're only going to
Okay, I'm getting to that.
Oh.
We're not done yet. I know, we're not done yet. Let's get there.
I'm so excited though.
Patience, Padawan. Okay, so here is a fairly diagrammatic view of what the avian respiratory tract looks like. And so here's a trachea right here. Actually, we'll look at the top one first. You can see that the air is flowing through through a portion of the bronchus here, and then it will flow into these posterior air sacs where it will be held. Then it will move through the lung, and we'll go through details of this in a second, into anterior air sacs, and then it will exit. It will exit the body. And so, you know, the way I like to think of the avian lung in terms of its design, it's sort of like a car radiator. You know, where you've got water that flows in one end and out the other, and in the meantime, it's going through all these little tubes and it's using air to cool it. Okay, and the avian lung works a whole heck of a lot like that. So let's get to Whitney's question right now. To get a bolus of air completely through the respiratory tracts takes 2 complete breath cycles. On the first inhalation, air is going to flow through the trachea, okay, and the bronchi into the posterior air sacs, mostly. Then on the first exhalation, air will move from the posterior air sacs into the lung. Then on the second inhalation, air will move from the lung into the anterior air sacs. And then on the second exhalation, the air will move from the anterior air sacs back out the trachea and be exhaled. Okay, now, make no mistake, it's not like the bird is only moving one bolus of air through its lung. There's continuous airflow through the lung. But you know, on this first inhalation, where air is moving from the outside through all the tubing into the posterior air sacs, there is also air moving from the posterior air sacs. So I got that right? Moving from the lung into the anterior air sac. So this one right here. All right. Did that make sense, or did I just bungle that?
Wait, how is it unidirectional if it comes out to the same place?
I'm gonna try to explain that. Okay, so again, when the bird inhales, it's moving air both into the posterior air sacs from outside and also from the lung into the anterior air sacs. Okay, when the bird exhales, okay, it is both moving air from the posterior air sacs into the lungs, but also moving air from the anterior air sacs out to the environment. Did that answer your question?
So you take the air in, and then it goes to the posterior air sac, and then it goes to the lung, and then to the anterior air sac.
Yeah. So I guess the way to think about this is on every inhalation and on every exhalation, you've got 2 things happening. Okay. So on an inspiration, you have 2 inspirations right here. You have this happening. You also have this happening right here. Okay. On the expirations, you have this happening you also have this happening. So you're always going to be exhaling air on an expiration. But that air that you are exhaling, you inhaled 2 cycles ago. Yeah,
Is it not considered tidal because it's never like fully empty?
it's not in and out. Tidal is when you look at the mammalian lung, you know, you're picking air straight into your lung, into your alveoli, and then pushing it straight back out. Here, it's moving in a circuit.
Okay.
I guess. It's like there's a circuit, but the entrance and exit from the circuit.
Are the same. But you know, air coming in and air going out doesn't happen at the same time.
Yeah.
Air coming in only happens on an inspiration, air going out only happens on an expiration. So air that's coming in, the air that's coming in is immediately going to the posterior air sac on the first one. Air is also moving from the lung into the anterior air sacs when the bird inhales. When the bird exhales, you're moving air from the posterior air sacs into the lung, but you're also taking air from the anterior air sacs and exhaling it. That's actually what's coming out of the bird's mouth when it exhales. So you have a continuous stream of air moving through the lungs. But if you're following the air that's coming in on this inhalation, it takes 2 breaths to get it all the way through the lung and then back out.
Okay. I think I understand it now.
What about you, Whitney? You think you got it? Emily?
It's continuous airflow through the lungs, but not through the.
Pardon me?
It's continuous airflow through the lungs, but like in and out, like trachea.
Yeah, I guess you could look at it this way. I mean, if you were not paying attention to what was going on in the lungs, I mean, air would be going in and out of the bird's mouth, but
Yeah.
that air is not coming directly in and out of the lung. It's taking a whole circuit inside the respiratory tract.
I get it.
Get it?
Yeah.
Cool. Whew. All right. Now,
Oh, it's just like.
the fact that the airflow is unidirectional contributes to the efficiency. But the other thing that contributes to the efficiency is how circulation relates to the lung itself. So the fundamental unit of the lung are these tubes through which the air flows in the lung that are called parabronchi. All right? Parabronchi. And they're para because you have these tubes that are all parallel to each other. All right? Notice how cleverly named that is. All right, so air moves in what we call the posterior, or actually it's called posterior secondary bronchi here, but it's also called dorsal bronchi, is another term they use for it. It'll go through the parabronchi and all gas exchange occurs right here. All right, and then it will exit through what's called the anterior secondary bronchus or the ventral bronchus down here. But the key thing here is how circulation occurs, because you have capillaries that wrap around these things. And what you end up with is a flow like this. So this purple arrow here represents the direction air is flowing. These arrows represent the direction blood is flowing. And this creates what we call a cross current flow. Now you all remember back to Gen Bio where you talked about counter current flow in fish and how efficient that is. You don't remember that?
I don't think we did talk about it, but we did just learn about this in CBA.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Then it's even more recent. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not in the CVA. Humans don't do this. So anyway, but you know, countercurrent is probably the most efficient of all respiratory designs because the entire time that, and this only exists in water, so the entire time that water and blood are in contact with each other, there is a favorable gradient for gas exchange to occur. All right. Now, the cross current isn't quite as efficient, but it's a whole heck of a lot more efficient than the tidal flow, you know, basically air moving in and out of alveoli. Okay. So this makes it very, very efficient. And the amount of oxygen that birds can extract from the air, it depends on who you read. I've seen values as high as about 60%, which is pretty impressive. When you consider that humans extract probably less than 20% of the oxygen. This is why artificial respiration works so good. There's so much oxygen left in the air that you exhale that you can give it to somebody else. Yes.
I understand the flow thing.
You don't understand it? So I'm gonna see, you know, I should actually put a diagram for this in here. I'm gonna see if I can. So you have air that is flowing, then you have blood that is flowing in this direction right here. All right. So when the air is coming in, you know, it has high, it has high O2, then when air goes out, it has low O2. The blood all starts with low O2, and it's picking up O2 as it crosses the blood here, or it crosses the air here. And so so the way this works is you start off with a really high gradient, and gas always flows passively. So it's always going to flow from a region of high oxygen to a region of low oxygen. And so you're going to get rapid flow of oxygen into this first bloodstream. Now, because this first bloodstream has taken some of this oxygen out, the gradient will be smaller here, but the gradient still exists. And so you'll continue to pick up more oxygen here. The gradient will be a little bit smaller here, but you'll pick up more oxygen, maybe not as much as you're picking up here. So the amount of oxygen that's being picked up by the capillaries will decrease as you move through the parabronchi. But by the time you get to the end of the parabronchi, the blood still will end up with more oxygen in it than the air has when it leaves, which makes it really efficient. All right. And so that, I don't know if that's helping you at all. The countercurrent's even better, because you can pretty much take almost all the air, all the oxygen out of water in a countercurrent system. You can't do that with cross current. But this is by far better than what happens in NALIS. Okay. Now, having said that, and this is a good lesson in how natural selection works, is that as efficient as the respiratory system in birds is, their blood cells are not that efficient, because they have nucleated blood cells, big nucleated blood cells. And so this is where you know, different strokes for different folks. Mammals, on the other hand, have really efficient blood cells. They have small, really high surface to volume ratio blood cells. They're biconcave to increase the surface area even further. And so they're really, really efficient at picking up and carrying oxygen. But the birds, they've invested their efficiency in the building of their lungs, and so they don't necessarily need that same efficiency in their red blood cells. So different strokes for different folks. All right, questions? Yes.
So like, we have the low oxygen air. Let's see, air flows this way, which means low oxygen would be on the bottom,
Correct.
high oxygen would be on top.
Correct.
So does the blood flow up? Or like go
No,
up?
the blood flows across.
But does it like,
I've never seen blood. You're gonna need to give me.
like,
So what blood? So these are the arteries and veins that are coming in to service the parabronchi. The blood is basically going to wrap around that and go back out.
okay, so just like on the same level, it doesn't like spiral up?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Never mind.
That actually wouldn't be the best design.
Okay,
But I mean, the major arteries and veins here will provide the capillaries for
Yeah.
the whole
Okay.
length of it. So basically, the capillaries will be at different levels, but when the blood mixes back up into the larger vessels, I mean, it'll all merge
Okay.
together.
perfect. Cool.
Did I do good?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Are we ready to move on?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I've never seen blood go.
Only when I poke a hole in a rabbit carotid, then it does do that.
Oh, it's weird.
Or when somebody pokes when somebody pokes a hole. Well, it's called the rabbit baptism. And I've got lots of pictures of students who have endured that. So
It's not something.
all right,
Take a picture of this.
all the time.
You should have a wall of shame.
Actually, most of them consider it a badge of honor. So
A wall
We'd be all over the honor of shame.
no, we don't do that because we keep everything. If you know, when we do our rabbit surgeries, we block off windows.
Yeah.
We keep that totally under wraps because in order to maintain the ability to do things like that here. Okay, so heart. The heart design for birds is not that is really not that different than it is in mammals. It's a 4-chambered heart where you got 2 atria, 2 ventricles. It's designed much the same way so that the right side of the heart is servicing the lungs, the left side of the heart is servicing the body. And so it's a double pump. So here, you know, we have veins from the body that's coming into the right atrium right here, from the right atrium to the right ventricle right here. And then when the ventricle contracts, it will go out through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. It will come back from the lungs and drop into the left atrium down here, down to the left ventricle, then be pumped out through the aorta to the body. I mean, so it's a pretty standard design for a heart. The one difference that we will see in how a heart in a bird is designed relative to a mammal is the hearts often will tend to be a little bit elongated, and this that actually allows the hearts to produce a higher pressure, and that'll become important in a little bit. If not, well, probably not today, but when we come back and talk about this a week from today. The electrical system of the heart is pretty much identical to what we see in mammals. The heart is capable of generating its own contractile rhythm. So it has a sinoatrial node right here, that little bunch of cells that are in the right atrium that will generate its own contraction signals. So if you take the heart out of the bird, it'll continue to contract. It does not need to be connected to the nervous system in any way. And remind me a week from today, and I'll tell you a good story that has to do with Arizona that illustrates how this works. But anyway, the sinoatrial node here, the atrioventricular node or AV node here, right, also in the right atrium, but right along the septum at the junction between the atria and the ventricles. And so the signal from the SA node is passed just through the walls of the atrium. It's picked up by the AV node where it slows down, and then will be conducted to the ventricles through these large fibers that are called AV bundles. Excuse me, if you're looking at an older text, they'll call it bundle of His. And then off these bundles are some smaller fibers that are called Purkinje fibers that wire up the ventricles. And the ventricles need this wiring because the ventricular walls are so thick that you can't just passively pass the signal through the walls. You need to actually wire it so that the signal gets to all the cells very, very quickly. And so it works very, very similar to a mammalian heart. And I'll stop there. Questions? Wasn't that exciting? And we've got more excitement to come, but after you guys have your best excitement on Thursday.
Oh, yeah.
So do you guys have some idea as to when you will plan to take the tests on Thursday
Probably like 9 or 10.
in the morning?
Yeah. I think like mid-late.
Okay, so you're all gonna have it done early.
Yeah, unless I take 8 years.
Well, you're gonna start it early.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. It just helps me to kind of plan, so,
There's not a class in here on Thursday. Are we allowed to get it in here?
yeah, that would be the plan, take it here. But so ecology meets here in 2. Yeah, if you guys get it done before 2, you can take it in here. If not, you'll have to go somewhere else and take it. But that's okay too.
Does it use Respondus?
No, we don't pay for respondents anymore, and I'm not gonna do respondents for you guys. That respondents is actually a pain in the neck. And you guys, I trust you guys.
I don't like getting an email every time I blink.
Well, no, there are some, there are some that you need to have it for. Okay, there are some in this major you need to have it for. But you guys aren't among them. Yeah,
So this document's not using the.
no,
Okay.
no, you're just gonna come in here, load up Canvas and take it. And you all understand that this is a closed book, closed note test. And I trust that you will, that you will honor that. And, if you don't, then God will come, strike you down, and there'll be 3 of you on a week from today.
Better watch out.
Yeah, it'll be pretty obvious who it was. It's not like you can get lost in a crowd in here.
I'm super excited to, you see, I have this plant that I bring with me to my tests. It was lost under my desk for about 2 months.
Yeah, but you know what? Your plant can't help you.
Oh, and it just whispered in my ear.
Yeah, well, or it can't make little photosynthetic notes on its
Yeah.
leaves or anything like that, so.
Well, Peter gets to learn about ornithology. Yeah. It's been
Don, I think last week you told us behind you. This week, but we have nothing better to do Saturday night. There's a choir concert.
That's this Saturday?
7:30 p.m. in Bowman.